Ciao ragazzi, welcome back. Claudio Gigante here with Giga Racing. Still January 8th today. Cold weather, still working on pre-season setup. And today we're going to talk a little bit about spare parts. You can see on my table some of the spare parts laid out. All of us have been at the track and something goes wrong and all of a sudden you're stuck and you can't practice or you can't race and you're there for 2 to 3 days. So one thing I can never stress enough, it's about spare parts, okay? And I usually classify it on 3 different sections. So we got our body spare parts, we got electrical spare parts, and we got our mechanical spare parts, okay? So we start with our body spare parts, and very important, we got handlebars. One of the first things that bends down or can bend down when you go down is handlebars, and it's make it really uncomfortable to ride if your handlebars is bent. So it'll compromise your days of practice, or it will compromise your entire weekend of race. So always a good thing to have is handlebars. Here I have foot peg sliders, very inexpensive. All the parts that you can see on the table you can order through Euro Race in Canada. Here they're really good. They can get any parts that you needed. But remember, all those parts are coming from Italy. So usually it's about 10 days, 2 weeks turnaround. So you only need to make sure that you have your little toolbox with spare parts when you go to a racetrack. So sliders, very inexpensive, but very good to have. Foot pegs. I got one of my old one here. I haven't put the order through for what I need. Couple of foot pegs, really important. They bend again, you can't ride properly. We got a collar for your handlebar. I only have the left side here, get it right, order the right side. It's always good to have it. Again, something that it will save your day or weekend. Then we got your brake lever, very important, and your clutch lever, very important, always in your toolbox. And then we have the bracket that holds the foot peg. Those also are really important. You can crack that aluminum. Now, when they start with the Ohvale bikes, the goal was to make racing inexpensive. So remember, those parts are not expensive, but they do break because they're not built like a serious race bike. So they're a little bit more fragile. So that's another thing. And then this is one of the cheap version of a gear shifter. This is a reverse gear shifter. Again, reverse gear shifter, very important. Also, we got the little pegs. These one goes on the brake side and one goes on the gearbox side. Again, a mandatory thing to have on your box. Go down this brake or it bends. You try to bend it back and it breaks. Is a really good thing to have. So that covers for our body parts. Then we have electrical. Nothing stressed me out enough about electrical. You can have your small ECU on those bikes is very little. It's inexpensive, and all of a sudden the RPM are acting funny or something is wrong. Easy to swap out and see if that's the problem. Okay, so good to have on your toolbox. Another thing that's really important: wiring harness. These are very inexpensive, and it's something can go wrong with it. And it's something so simple like switching the cable, the wiring harness, and all of a sudden you're back on riding and no problem. So it will save you money in the long run, because if you're paid an entry fee, all of a sudden if you can't be on the truck, well, you're lost all that entry fee and the time that you're at the truck. Okay, so that's for our electrical. Spark plugs, again, I usually buy it in a pack of 4. On those bikes, you're supposed to change the spark plug if you're taking it serious, anywhere between 10 hours, I will say, to 20 hours. So always have spare spark plugs with you. And something that it doesn't go really often, but it did happen to me, a carburetor, a rebuild kit, because you can start leaking carburetor. Yesterday was fine, and then all of a sudden today your bike is leaking gasoline from the carburetor, and I guarantee you 9 times out of 10 nobody has the gasket for the carburetor at the racetrack. So another thing good to have. Okay, fuel. On my bike I have a quick fuel disconnect. Makes your life a lot easier when you want to take the tail section off of the Ohvale, and you got to disconnect. You don't have to do any, barbed wire retainers, okay, or C-clamp. You just press, comes off, and your tail section is out. That's one good thing to have. The only downside is sometimes it can leak from the gasket. So again, another good thing to have in your toolbox. Very important, spare hardware. Those bikes have, vibration. Who check all the bolts all the time? Not many people, right? So you probably do it in the winter time when you're there cleaning. You check all the bolts and stuff to make sure that everything is tied up. But over time they come loose. You lose a bolt or something. Almost impossible to find around the paddock. People that have extra bolts and nuts. So always remember to have extra hardware with you for the bike. Oil filter. That is actually something that if you're done your oil change, you're not going to need it. It's always good to have in the toolbox in case you have to do an extra oil change. Gearing, I have a friend of mine, he set out, 2 days. He drove about 12 hours to a racetrack with his Ducati. Got there, 2 sections in, his rear sprocket was all chewed up, no rear sprocket, had to sit out a day and a half at the racetrack, 12 hours drive, and he couldn't find the sprocket, so it was stuck. Okay, so important to have spare rear sprocket as well as front sprockets. I always recommend to have your favorite rear sprocket for that racetrack, front sprocket favorite for that racetrack, and then maybe if you spare, if you want to change gearing, if you want to try something different, if you're trying to get a better lap time. So always good to have gear, and also brand new chain. Always have a brand new chain with you, because if you're swapping those, most likely if you chewed up your rear chain, your rear sprocket, your chain is done. So even if you have your sprocket, new sprocket, you put it in, you gotta change your chain, because if you don't change your chain, you're gonna chew up that rear sprocket again and you're stuck again. Brake pads, depends how often you check them. I always have a spare, sets of brake pads in my toolbox. Just in case. I like to run my brake pads low, just because there's no point of wasting. So you're running it low. If you're running it low, always have a spare. So if you ride it a little hard that day and your brake pads don't look great, you can always swap it over overnight. Okay, and that covers up a little bit, guys, our spare parts selection items. One thing actually that I forgot that is really important. This is a clutch cable. You want to have a clutch cable and a gas cable, travel cable, because they go and they don't give you any warning. So again, you got one of those broken, well, guess what? You got to sit out and you can't ride the bike. So always have one of those clutch and throttle in your toolbox. I hope I cover everything that more or less you need at the racetrack as an immediate need. Anything else I forgot, you can always comment on the below. If you like what you're seeing, please subscribe to the channel. We'll come up with some new videos coming up. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for watching Ohvale Giga Racing, and we'll see you at the next. Ciao.